Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the ISF Bright Talk channel today. My name is Danny Padden, Marketing Executive at the ISF, and I'm extremely excited to welcome you to the Cybersecurity Showcase Week. As many of you will be aware, we're midway through Cyber Awareness Month, and we've been very busy in preparing for this week of thought-provoking webinars that are upcoming. Whilst many are now aware of the important role cybersecurity is having, awareness is still key. So one of the main causes of security-related incidents is still human error, and there's much work to be done in highlighting why cyber is for everyone. So with this in mind, we have a very fitting topic of discussion to kick off the Showcase Week today. I'm joined by Steve Dobson, Head of Marketing, Account and Relationship Management at the ISF, and he's going to be exploring how cyber threats are manifesting themselves today, how the ISF can help, and what we can all do to reduce the risk of a cyber attack. Before we start, I've got a few housekeeping items to cover off. This presentation will last for about 30 minutes and then we'll end with a question and answer session. So please make sure you're typing any questions in the question box on your screen below, and you can do that at any time throughout the session today. All viewers are automatically muted, so please, if you are experiencing any technical difficulties, just dial out and then you can just log straight back into the webinar. And finally, this session, as well as all of the sessions throughout this week, will be recorded and available on demand. That'll be through the Cyber Awareness Hub, which you can access down below, but also on the Bright Talk channel. So with this being said, I'll now hand you over to Steve, and I'll see you in about half an hour for a Q&A session.
Fantastic, Danny. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon for those on record or download, or good evening for those working late. Little bit of a session really of why cyber is for everyone. A lot of people feel that cybersecurity is a technology issue, something I need to think about with the technology team only, but really it's for everyone. Tiny bit about myself, as Danny mentioned, I look after our account, relationship and marketing teams at the ISF. I've been in professional services marketing since the mid-90s. Originally, I was a nuclear physicist, so we had a lot of technology there. But really what I want to make sure people understand is that technology is for everyone and the challenges of cybersecurity are for everyone. When we think about data, there's a huge dependency on information. And really from the early 90s, with the adoption of email and internet, the need for data and connectivity has grown exponentially. And that really happened when social media took off. And obviously in the mid-20s, we start to see the growth in messaging platforms and mobile devices, making data personal. And the thing that means is really that data used to be created by monolithic mainframes, large computer systems. It might have been individual email traffic pieces. But as these different technology pieces have started to connect, we've seen a huge growth in data. If we think about data, the amount of data that is being created in the world is truly staggering. About 90% of data in the world today has been created in the last 2 years. If you think every time you take a photo, it's backed up to the cloud somewhere, there are backups of backups, it's on your phone. So there are huge amounts of data and repositories of data. Truly, there's been more data created since 2015 than during the entire previous history of the human race. And frustratingly, potentially, that amount of data is continuing to accelerate. And it's really the connections between that data that become the problem. So if you think about this connected world, when people maybe are careless with their use of potentially mobile devices or home networks, for example, especially now in this hybrid workplace that we're dealing with, those careless activities may create opportunities for people who have malicious intent to access huge amounts of data. And that can really be a problem for people and organizations. So, when we think about data, let's break it down a little bit. What do we mean by data and what do we mean by cyber risk? Well, there might be things that we think are obvious, as I mentioned, human error, maybe negligence, but also there are adversarial people who wish to do us harm, either through physical damage, destruction, jealousy, maybe, or they're looking at, they may be unhappy with the role the company plays, or they're looking to manifest itself in ways where they can gain, benefits, be it financial or others. There are also environmental and infrastructure failures. There could be damage through weather incidents. There could be infrastructure failures, maybe through, things like, pipelines being cut or power outages. And all these things manifest themselves for the organization with short and long-term business impacts, be it operational or regulatory or reputational. Fundamentally, they all really drive financial loss to a company. There's something that the company has to mitigate for, take account of, and understand what can we do to protect the company, its employees, and the long-term success of that organization. So all these different threats are things that a normal company will be thinking, okay, what do we need to try and reduce so that the company is successful and continues to be successful into the future? And when we're thinking about threats possibly in the cyber world, we think, oh, it's a new thing, people making cyber attacks or data leakages. But really, this goes back to, the days of cyber espionage and actually industrial espionage. People were always willing and keen to find out why someone else was successful and to try and understand what is it they do well. And protecting those secrets, be they intellectual property, creative property, against people within a country or in the wider world, has always been something that companies need to do. And people look at cyber espionage and they might say, oh, yes, it's due to large nation state players. People might say China, but it could be people closer to home. Or they might be saying, okay, is it because of, for example, a ransomware attack? There was a recent attack in the States that shut down an oil pipeline. And people saying, oh, well, why would they do that? Because they were trying to extract money. They were trying to make a ransomware payment for that. So there are lots of reasons for people, malicious or otherwise, to try and attack companies. And sadly, it's something we see increasing. So when we look at the headline grabbing threats and we understand, okay, these challenges seem to be something, we go, well, who gets affected? Well, sadly, on the screen, there's a list of, just recent examples of organizations that to some shape or other have had some form of cyber incident. And they can be from different sectors, from entertainment, for government, from financial, for media, for technology. And the sad truth is that incidents don't discriminate. They are, sadly, something that is on everybody's radar. Everybody is, to some extent, at risk. So the question is really, well, who's next? How can I protect myself? So when we look at these costs, it's about $6 trillion a year. So there's huge money in the cyber world that people are trying to steal. And obviously, as these incidents have increased, executives, the people that lead our companies, are more and more aware of these problems. They say, well, what are we going to do about it? If we look over time, there are bigger and bigger breaches, bigger and bigger incidents. And sadly, the execs say, well, okay, I want to fix this. I want to know why this growing problem is something we can do. If we look in Google, for example, over time, so the graph is over time, we get an idea of, okay, how many people were looking for key terms? And we see this kind of graph where the green line at the bottom is cybersecurity. So for a long time, cybersecurity doesn't do much. There was a peak, and that peak was actually when Barack Obama said, we're going to introduce cybersecurity and cyber awareness month. But sadly, it dropped down again. But as you realize, the other peaks where, network security, IT security, information security as search terms became less and less important. And over time, aligned with all those bubbles we saw on the previous slide, over time, moving from the early 90s right the way through to the present day, as the growth in those cyber attacks has happened, there'll be more people searching, more and overall more people concerned about cybersecurity and what do we need to do. So it's certainly a growing issue and a pressing issue for organizations. And the ISF provides a lot of research, and we'll highlight right at the end some of the tools that are available for people who are either members of the ISF or people in the general public will know a little bit more about the kind of threats that might affect their organization looking out into the future. And we run a number of reports called Threat Horizon that we've been doing for about 14 years now. We've been reaching out and looking at the kind of challenges that organizations face. And some of those early reports are available for the general public, with the latest reports obviously available for our members. When we look at threats, there are typically three types of threats, and we're going to focus on one which is the adversarial, people who seek to do us harm. There are two other categories of threats. One of them is accidental, which we mentioned. So it could be somebody makes a mistake, but typically it will be something that wasn't planned for. It's just a foolish error. Okay. And the third category is environmental, where there are things, for example, weather damage to an installation that causes an outage. But the main category that people are usually interested in is, these bad players. It's easier to blame somebody else than to look and say, actually, we probably should have done a better job making people aware. And if you think of the call that we're on today, making people aware shows that you and your organization are really taking cybersecurity more seriously, because it's everybody's business. You can't say it's just the business of the technology team, because we're all affected and we can all play a part in trying to improve our security stance. So when we look at security, people think, well, now there's an incident, we'll obviously pick it up. Sadly, the world of technology, as we showed right on that early slide of how many different devices are available and connected, it takes a long time, up to 2 weeks, for the automated systems to catch up with, oh, there seems to be a problem. And you go, well, why couldn't they do things faster? Because then you have a lot more instances where people saying we have to stop the systems to check. So they're quite cautious in the automated systems, but it still takes a period of time. So there is a real important role for people to raise their hand and say, I don't think this is right. Before the electronic systems, the automated systems catch up, if people feel uncomfortable, stand up and talk about it. So it's something we'll raise in later slides. So how do we interact? When something goes wrong, there are, from standard through routine emergency, major instance, to what we call an extinction level event, a really huge attack. What are the kind of things that we do and how do we react? Well, we'd like to think, oh, what do we do in a nice planned way? But sadly, it's more of a question of what the hell's just happened. If it's taken a while, our systems could go down very quickly, and we'll suddenly see an impact that may have been sitting in our servers and our systems for a number of days, but then when it decides to deploy, it deploys very quickly. And that means that something happens in a very scary and worrying way. We have a slide that's based on our members' feedback. And we said, well, what does it feel like being attacked? And they came up with a whole pile of comments and quotes. They said, basically, in large attacks, your email system goes down, your phone system can go down, even the fire doors and the environmental systems within the building can go down. They're all interconnected technology systems. They said, it feels very threatening. It all seems to happen at once. It's a very scary, worrying, difficult situation. And I said, yeah, it's a very nasty thing to happen. So how can we reduce the chances of these things happening? And how can we plan for it and rehearse for it so that we're better prepared? And that really is a key piece of what I want to cover in this session is how do we reduce the incidents? There's a lot of technology that we can deploy, but equally when something goes wrong, how do we plan and prepare so that we're better prepared to recover faster? Because really, the sad truth is we're all going to get some level of attack. But if we do the right things, those attacks will be small and those attacks will be easy and quickly for us to be able to recover. And that's really the secret of surviving in the cyber world that we have today, is say, yeah, we have made plans, we've rehearsed those plans, and those plans are something that should bad things happen, we can deal with them very quickly. Being quick is a big thing. When we look at, for example, a large company like Amazon, the loss of activity on their website for 1 second has significant consequences. Now, they're a big organization, they do a lot of work online, but even so, speed is something that we really need to start thinking about. And when we look at cyber attacks and start to plan for what kind of cyber attacks could happen, we will look at what we call two types of events. The events are called black swans and grey rhinos. Black swans, very rare, surprises that happen out of the blue, wasn't expecting it. So some could say that the pandemic was a black swan event, wasn't expected, unlikely, and then it suddenly happens as a giant impact to us. The other types of event we call grey rhinos, where if we thought about it, so you know what, yeah, I could have anticipated that happening. Over time, it's a small thing, it's a lumbering change, but it's big, and when it happens, it's going to hurt. And that would be something like, for example, environmental consequences. Sea levels rising. A lot of the cloud data, we store our data from the cloud. Well, where are those server farms? Where are those places? For a lot of people, they're based in the east coast of Ireland, in around Dublin. It's a low-lying area of land. Should sea levels rise, those server farms, which are located close to water for cooling and to be more environmentally friendly for the cooling systems, should the sea levels rise substantially, they would be flooded. They are more at risk of weather events. We see the difficult weather they have in Florida, and again, where there are server facilities, actually, these things with global warming are more likely to happen. So that would be classed as a grey runner, and things that if we thought about saying, yeah, we need to start planning for that event. It may take 5 years, it may take longer, but we need to build plans around those events. So two types of cyber events. And when we look at cyber events, we think of typically someone who's the teenager in a basement. There's about 1.7 million people using the dark web, the not so nice version of the internet, and they're using it for malicious purposes. And when we look at the dark web, we say, okay, what are people doing? 57% are devoted solely to criminal activity. Well, why does that matter? It matters because the organizations who would seek to do you harm don't need to be technically savvy. They can now access the information they need to do you harm through the dark web. They can get malware as a service. If it works, they get paid. If it doesn't work, that service is free. So we're seeing organizations using the dark web more and more as a repository for malicious code and software and to resell data that they've exfiltrated. So it's increasingly a challenge that people find. And when we look at organizations, typically we'll think of criminal gangs. It's no longer onesie twosie people. It's now a global business. If we said it's a multi-trillion-dollar business, there are big organizations that sadly are looking at ways to do us harm. And there'll be different types of attack. The attack we saw on the NHS, the WannaCry attack. And there's an approach that people will use to try and attack organizations to gain money, and they do that in a repeated basis around the world. And the benefit of organizations like the ISF is we work collaboratively with our members globally so that together we can share experiences and work together to protect ourselves from harm. So that works as a collaborative group. But we're also faced with possibly the more worrying group is where nation states are using these technology tools to try and perform their nation state attacks. And you might look at nation states of countries like North Korea, Libya, but also some of the main players like potentially Russia or the United States, where they've used it for specific military gains or advantages. So there was a recent case, sadly, with the challenges we have in the current war situation we have with Russia. We say, okay, how did people use this? How did it affect people? Well, prior to the annexation of the Crimea, there was a cyber attack into organizations. And you said, well, what are we going to do? How does it affect people? Well, the organizations that did business in those countries were then affected. And that affected organizations like Mondelez, affected organizations like Maersk Shipping, and it cost them hundreds of millions of dollars to recover. And we know this because of some of the papers that were released through Edward Snowden and the WikiLeaks. We can realize that actually the originator of the cyber issues was the National Security Agency that found vulnerabilities in Microsoft software and decided to use them for specific gains in the US NSA. And that was picked up by Russian organizations and then deployed into other theaters that others benefit. So sometimes we are not, as organizations, the target. We are sadly collateral damage in somebody else's war. But in all cases, the effects are huge. And that's a real challenge that we say, well, we can do what we can, but at the end, sometimes we have to accept that there is a real chance that we will be affected by a cyber attack. So when we look at these cyber attacks, what can we do? Well, thankfully, quite a lot. Around 88% of data breaches reported to the UK Information Commissioner were due to challenges of the first line of defence. And the first line of defence is you. The human element is really the thing that we need to make sure that we are working together and thoughtfully to try and improve our opportunity to defend against and to react to cyber attacks, because technology can only go so far. Let's use people where we go, because we are the first line of defense. So what can I do? Some simple things. Well, the first thing is to recognize that information is a key asset. As we said, your data is everywhere. And if you think, if I gained access, for example, to your mobile device, possibly on that mobile device, there are contact details, emails of friends, etc. But you might have your banking app, and that banking app might have credit card details. It might have in a travel app details of your passport number. So those kind of elements are valuable to criminals. So protecting whatever you have is an important piece of your own cyber defense and defense for an organization. The second piece is to realize that, yeah, it's, you're just buying something from eBay, or you're buying something from a small site. You're saying, okay, well, it's asking me for a password. I'll just put something simple in. No, passwords and backups are important. So when you use a password, be thoughtful of using a good password. And we can talk about that later, but fundamentally, the passwords and the backups are important. And when you're working on a corporate system, really, if you just, I'm going to do something, I'll just use my own home laptop because it's easier. No, use your corporate systems, because the corporate systems will be checked, secure, and backed up automatically. So there's a real push to say, okay, even though maybe it's more convenient for the use of the home systems, focus on your corporate systems and use your corporate systems where appropriate. Okay. Email. The main vector for a lot of these attacks is email. So if you get a surprise email that is asking you to take an action, maybe you want to think about it first. Maybe you want to call the person. You just sent me an email. I want to check it's okay. Send a little text. Now find a difference. Just checking that this is correct. And did you send it? Just to think. If it doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, just ask. Slow it down a little bit, because what attackers work on is what's called heuristic behavior, which is our behavior when we're under a little bit of stress. We maybe take things, we do things, we're a little bit impetuous, we rush to help people, we rush to do things, and they use that against us, because I was just trying to help out. Maybe you should have thought a little bit first. So just take care with email and slow down a little bit. And if it doesn't check out, check in. If you have, from a corporate environment, a tech team, if you think you've clicked on the wrong thing, thinking back to that, it takes 13 days for an electronic error detection system to find problems. If you think you've clicked on the wrong thing, just reach out to your tech team and say, it didn't seem right, I clicked. Is it okay? The worst thing you can do is to do nothing. To feel you've made a mistake and just quietly shut your laptop and pretend it never happened. Because that problem will be festering within your laptop or within your network, creating damage when there was a chance to catch it early and minimize the damage. So reach out to your tech team. If you think, I'm sure it's nothing, just check, because it could be something. And they would rather confirm it's nothing, thanks for checking in, than it being something and you letting that problem fester and grow and create a really big problem when it manifests itself. So please, if it doesn't check out, check in. A piece really for those from a corporate basis is be aware and practice for an attack. When we work with our members, we say, how often, first, do you have a plan for different types of cyber attack, for different scenarios? And they base it on the likelihood of threat and the systems they have, and we work with them often to build those plans. But the key thing is to make sure that people are aware of the plan and have practiced in such a way that actually it's put them under a bit of stress. So would you really have done that? Oh, well, actually, in a rush, maybe I would have done a shortcut and just done this. Well, actually, let's try and build the plan so that we have repeatable, predictable, and planned behaviors more. And that means the opportunity to practice. And obviously, as staff change, as we forget things, you need to rehearse those plans. We would suggest at least on an annual basis, just to check, are you doing the right things? Do you remember where the right security, the right protocols, the right escalation systems are, so that you know what to do? And as new members join, they're aware of the right things to do. So make sure you have predictable response by testing, train, improve, and repeat your plans. So, who are we to make all these predictions? Well, we're an informal information. We're an international association of 450 global organisations around the world, typically from the FTSE 500 to Fortune 2000 organisations. We're a not-for-profit organisation, so we're driven by purpose rather than profit, which means that we really want to work with our members to make sure that their best advice is shared and their best views and their best practices are shared amongst the members so we can collectively benefit. We network with our members and we write a number of pieces of research. So I mentioned already we do a threat horizon research. We provide a number of governance, risk and compliance tools to help people measure not just their own security posture, but also the security challenges of their suppliers. We know that around 1 in 5 attacks are sadly through their suppliers and their supply chain. So we help our members audit their own environment and what they do. We have a framework called the Standard Good Practice. Around 25 million organizations and people benefit from Standard Good Practice as a framework of security, as a complete overview of all the different challenges in security, and also what to do to improve your security stance, be it in security architecture, maybe it's in agile development, maybe it's improving your stance in the cloud. So we did a lot of work to research and to identify the key challenges and how organizations can secure themselves. And when we look at what you can benefit through our membership, we have a number of events. We run events around the world. And as members, anyone can participate who's a member of the organization. So it's something that we really, when you join the ISF, you're joining a global community with events to meet face-to-face and online around the world. But also for those who maybe aren't members or are considering membership, we're keen to support cybersecurity for everybody. So we provide a number of podcasts. And I guess if I'm going to make one recommendation alongside the cyber things to say, okay, take your time, be a bit more thoughtful of email and protecting passwords and understand the value of data. I would make one recommendation is reach out and look through whatever your favorite podcast platform is, be it Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or Amazon Music, whatever. Search for Information Security Forum and join the series of podcasts that we run. We run podcasts throughout the year. There's obviously an archive of podcasts, and they're a really easy way to learn a bit more about cybersecurity, the challenges we face, and to hear the member stories and people who've coped with and managed their organizations through really challenging cyber attacks and security incidents. So it's a really good background for people keen to learn more and understand what they can do in the cybersecurity space. A few little things. 65% of companies with over 500 users are never prompted to change their password. Okay, so when you think of those big companies, there's often a core of people, maybe in leadership positions, stop asking the boss to change your password. There's a vulnerability. So, understanding passwords and understanding people's willingness to change passwords, use passwords, is a really important piece of improving your cybersecurity. Another little snippet is when you think of your home environment. Now, most of us are working from a home environment, at least for part of the week. When you think of your home environment, there are hundreds of individual smart devices that are connected together and may need to be updated. Sure, it's not as simple as just, I've got to change my microwave or my cooker, but there are more and more connected devices, from doorbells and baby alarms, baby monitors, security cameras, to our actual home routers and the systems we may use for a work environment. And more of those devices are reliant on access through a router or a password. So when you buy a router or a password, check the password. Is it a complex password that can't be copied and couldn't be guessed? Or does it say password 1 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? We find sadly that a lot of organizations have great strength in their organizational platform, but now people in the home environment aren't helping people think you need to look at your home environment as an extension of your work platform and a vulnerability. So that's a really important piece that you need to think about when you're looking at your organization. Why invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to build malware when you can either buy it from the dark web, or even simpler, just convince somebody to do something stupid? And how do you convince people to do something stupid? All intelligent people. Well, the sad truth is you put them into a situation of stress. You make them rush. You make them hurry. And so for an end slide, I'm going to give you a challenging question. Easy, easy peasy. Okay. A bat and a ball cost £1.10 in total. The bat costs £1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Your first answer, and you write it down, probably is, well, £1.10, bat and ball, bat costs £1 more, so the ball costs 10 pence. Well, that's wrong. Because if the ball costs 10 pence and the bat costs £1 more, the bat costs £1.10, so the bat and the ball cost £1.20. That's not correct. The bat and the ball cost £1.10 in total. Oh yes. The bat must cost £1.05 and the ball must cost 5p. Okay, that's the correct answer. But if you are rushed, often you will take the wrong decision. So key takeaway from this is to slow down with email, be thoughtful of your passwords, and together we can improve the cybersecurity for everyone in all our organizations. Thanks a lot. Back to you, Danny.
Great. Thank you very much, Steve. I think that was really, really insightful and a nice succinct way of exploring why cyber is for everyone. I'm going to move on to the questions section now. So firstly, pretty simple and short one. You mentioned training for cyber attacks, but we've got someone asking, how can you actually do that in a purposeful way and realistic way?
Okay, that's a really good question. So thank you for the person who raised it. The first thing to do is, we typically say employ a third-party agency because, when you're yourself, you make a lot of assumptive views when you're planning for a cyber attack. Oh, they'd all do this, they'd do that. Have someone fresh come to the organization, have a look and say, okay, let's build a cyber security attack, maybe using the type of organization you are and the type of things you do, and put people in a room and say, okay, first thing, we're going to remove your phones because phones don't work in a cyber attack. You might maybe have a corporate phone or you have a corporate network. In a cyber attack, typically the phone system would go. So, okay, with those people in a room, let's try and rehearse. Do people know what to do? Where are the policies work? And really, it's to run a scenario-based situation. They take typically half a day, where you actually run through what would you do, what's next, and you are mentored through to test people's knowledge of their own systems, their own processes, and how that process would work in a realistic scenario. So it's a really good thing to actually test. Now, we recommend doing these multiple times a year. But it's a big piece of the work that the ISF does for its members and for organizations is doing these cyber simulation exercises because it really helps people feel, okay, I know what it's like and it makes sense and these are the actions I'd like to take. So that's what we recommend. So it's running an exercise, but actually being thoughtful about creating activity with a third party. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. And just to note, we do have reference to cyber simulations from the ISF in the resource kit down below. Next question. We have a question that's asking about passwords. So what is the best approach for passwords? And they're asking, do we go really complicated or do we just regularly change them?
Yeah, there's a lot of advice on this and it changes over time. Historically, people said you need to change your password every 3 months. And in some organizations, that's the right thing to do. For all passwords, we would suggest you need to understand it's a mixture of upper and lowercase letters and numbers and where possible special characters. Now, should it be 8? Should it be 12? Well, it depends on the information you're trying to secure. So, is it one password suits all? The best approach that we'd recommend is multi-factor authentication, where you're using more than one route to confirm a password. Sadly, it really depends on the organization. Some organizations have moved to a single sign-on, which is a great system. But the problem with single sign-on is that it's a huge corporate overhead to maintain and manage. So a lot of organizations now are really going to the multi-factor authentication. But for all passwords, a little bit is situation specific. If you're not protecting something of great importance, you still got to put a good password in because, it's not important. Yeah, but what does it connect to? I'll give you a tiny example. There was a casino in Vegas and they attacked the casino security system through the aquarium. You think, oh, it's a little fish tank. No, it's a big aquarium. But that's a kind of vulnerability that people say, well, is that possible? Yeah, it's the kind of thing we see in manufacturing systems where often the microcontrollers that drive, for example, conveyor belts are very simple devices. So a little bit is, understand from the complexity of your organization and listen to what your tech team's saying. If they say you have to use a password a certain way, you've got to do it. It's the only way they can get a consistent type of response. But we recommend multi-factor authentication where possible.
Great. Thank you very much. We have another live question here. So they said you've shared a good insight of extending the protection at home network to protect the corporate network, as we have obviously more home workers in today's scenario. So what can be done to have this covered as part of standard practice?
Well, there's a lot you can do, and actually the ISF have provided some hybrid working guidelines, which I think will be available in the pack we provide, and they're available on our public website. But the key thing when you're extending is to, first of all, you'll have a corporate network, which is probably driven through a virtual private network, a VPN. So that drives your corporate systems, but it's being a little bit situationally aware. If you're in a coffee shop, you're in an unsecure environment. People can be listening in to the unsecure environment to see what you're doing. It's that old story of someone looking over your shoulder. If you're doing something that's confidential, secure, do you have a way of protecting your screen? Should you be doing that kind of information on a laptop in a environment like a coffee shop? So being situationally aware is a really important part. If you're at a home network, have you looked at the password? Your router, is it a sensible router? Have you changed the password? Or is it a password that makes sense, as in, it's a complicated password? So look at the basics of your environment first. Don't just assume, oh, someone else is going to fix it. So I would say in a hybrid work environment, be aware of your situation in a coffee shop or in a public area. Should you be doing that kind of work there? And second thing is, in your home environment, understand what you're doing with the router and the virtual private network. Are you in the corporate network? Is it secure? And ask your IT team. And if they need help, there'll be some guidance devices, guidance materials we can provide around hybrid working on the public website of the ISF at securityforum.org.
Lovely, thank you. And now I will move on to our final question, which is, can I share this presentation?
Sure. I mean, that's really, I hope people want to do it. This presentation, subject to the BrightTalk rules, shareable for all. If people have interest in the ISF, please look at us on securityforum.org, but please share this as widely as you wish. If you want access to the Threat Horizon reports, we have some of the earlier editions available on securityforum.org. So please reach out there. There's a note, as I said, on hybrid working. If people want more information, please look into securityforum.org and search for information, and we'll provide it from there. I hope that helps. Thanks, Danny.
Great, thank you very much. So that wraps up this morning's session. Again, just to note that we do have all those downloads available below. So please download your free Cyber Awareness Month resource kit, share it across your network. It's really, really important, especially throughout Cyber Awareness Month. I'd like to note we still have an exciting program coming up this week. So please register, share across your network. You can do that both on the public website. Members can do that on ISF Live, and you can also stay within BrightTalk and do that just right now as well. Attending live, you can engage with speakers. You can have key questions answered like we've done today. But please note, on demand is just as effective, and it provides a great resource if you want to share across your network. Finally, if you've enjoyed today's session, please leave a rating down below. And I look forward to seeing many of you on this afternoon session, where we're going to have Benoit discussing countering supply chain attacks. So thank you very much, Steve, and thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, everyone. Bye.